What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to a brand new Amazon video. I am back with another discussion video, one where me and you guys in the comments, everyone else in the comments can go ahead and talk back and forth and kind of discuss what we think on this topic. And today's topic is going to be about, should we be allowed to keep our phones in the Amazon warehouse? So for those who don't know, prior to COVID, we were not allowed to have our phones in Amazon facilities at all. You had to either leave it in your locker or you had to leave it in your car. You could not walk past those turnstiles with your phone. It just wasn't a thing. You weren't allowed to have it at all during that time period, and it absolutely sucked. I didn't work there back then, but I could imagine that would be horrible. I don't know how the people who did got through it, but yeah, so prior to COVID and after COVID, we're probably not going to be allowed to have our phones again. I've heard that managers have been talking about it, and we probably will eventually go back to that rule where you are not allowed to have the phones in the facilities. So we're going to be discussing that today. I'm going to be giving my thoughts, and make sure you guys comment down below before everything begins, before the discussion begins. Let me know what you guys in the comments down below think. Do you think that we should be allowed to keep our phones in the warehouse? Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think. And yeah, with that being said, I'm going to give my thoughts now, and then we can go ahead and talk afterwards. So I'm going to start this video off by discussing why I think we should be allowed to keep our phones in the warehouse. I'm going to have some points and topics on why I think we should. And the very first one, and I think this is one of the biggest ones, I think it'll genuinely improve productivity in the warehouse. Now that does sound a little crazy, I know. You would think if you have your phones, people would just be on it all day and people wouldn't be able to focus on the work. Everyone would just be scrolling through Twitter and Instagram or whatever. But to be honest, I genuinely believe that if everyone had their phones and we were allowed to keep our phones on the floor like we are right now, I genuinely believe that productivity would be boosted. Because just think about it, when you're at home, let's say you're washing the dishes or cleaning your house or doing chores, whatever you may be doing, isn't it always better when you're using music? Just think about it. If you have a podcast in the background, a YouTube video in the background, or some music in the background, isn't it just always better to have it like that as opposed to not having it? Let's say you're doing dishes. Isn't it better to just have music? Because when you don't have music, you start to get focused on other things. Your mind starts to scramble. You start to think about maybe what's happening on Instagram or Snapchat right now. You start to think about all the things. Your mind just runs and runs and runs. And eventually you're just I'll do this later. You get on your phone, you scroll through Instagram, whatever. As opposed to when you do have your music on, you're listening to music, you're in the zone, you're doing your dishes, you're doing your chores, cleaning the house. You go ham. Honestly, it's you work so much harder. And this might not be for everyone, but I know for a lot of people can focus and get a lot more work done if they are listening to music or a podcast or anything like that. I'm more of a podcast guy. I do love music, but at the end of the day, I think everyone, when they have those headphones in, they are in the zone. Honestly, regardless of what you're doing, you are much more in the zone. I know my wife does this a lot. She is one of the people who can work 50 times harder and focus on her work so much better if she has music in her ear, playing music on her phone, whatever it may be. So honestly, I think that having music on and working, it'll definitely increase productivity for people. I think overall you would see better rates because people who are just listening to music would probably just sit there going ham, just focusing on the music but doing the work as best as they possibly can. As opposed to if you're not doing it, you're just sitting there bored, you might just be throwing stuff in the bin, whatever. You don't really care, you're not focused, you might get distracted. You'll focus and work a lot harder if you do have music. At least in my opinion, that's what I believe. And I know for a lot of people at home, they can probably relate to the fact that music makes them just go in. And I think that'll increase productivity if we're allowed to have our phones, if we're allowed to listen to music or podcasts, honestly, maybe even audiobooks. The second point that I do want to bring up is the fact that the emergency line at Amazon is useless. So for those who don't know, I had no idea about this. If it wasn't for the Amazon subreddit, I still would have no idea about this. Amazon gives us an emergency number to give to your family in case there is an emergency outside of work because you're not allowed to have your phone. And I had no idea about this until I found out about it on Reddit. Amazon never told me this. They never gave me a number. To this day, I've been working here for a year and a half and I still don't know the number. Whatever it is, please comment down below. I don't know. I think it's location dependent, but Amazon does give you an emergency number and the line is absolutely useless. I'll use an example that somebody commented on Reddit a few months ago. I do not remember the specific user, so forgive me for that. But there was a story on Reddit where this woman and her husband both worked at the same exact facility at the same job. They both worked at Amazon, same facility, same everything. And one day the woman's husband fell off of a ladder and hit his head and had to go to the emergency room. They were working on that same day together in the same building, and she had no idea that this happened, and she didn't find out until somebody came up to her and told her several hours after the fact. She had no idea. She thought this whole time that she was working, her husband was somewhere else working, doing the job like a normal day, but little did she know he was in the emergency room this entire time, and nobody knew. Like, she did not know. It wasn't until several hours afterwards that she was informed, and this whole time she was working, her husband was in the emergency. The Amazon line, not only do people not know about it, it's pretty much useless. If you don't figure out things until several hours later, then why is there an emergency line to begin with? There's also been other stories where emergencies have happened outside of work with family members, etc., kids maybe, where something happened, somebody called the emergency line to alert their person that is working in the warehouse, and the Amazon people didn't come up and tell the employee until several hours later. It is a huge delay between the emergency and the person finding out and having to go help that person or whatever it may be. So if that's the case, what is the point of having an emergency line at all? It is useless. It is much faster to just have your phone on you so that if somebody needs to call you or somebody needs to text you because there is a true emergency, you'll be able to just hear the notification in your phone or see it, or maybe if you have an Apple Watch, you'll get the message right there and you'll be able to see it right then and there, and you'll know, okay, I gotta go. Let's say like something's happening at school and your kids need to go home. What use is it if you're not gonna find out until several hours later? There's no use in that. You should be able to just have your phone so you can know immediately. If the emergency line is useless, let us keep our own phones. At least that's what I think. What do you guys think about that? The third point that I want to bring up for keeping our phones, and I think this one is going to be a little bit of a shorter one, it's the fact that we're not children. Who are you to have us walk into work and just take our phones up? I've never heard of a job in my life that does that, except for Amazon. Like, just think about that. Like, we're not kids. You can't just take our property like that. That is our property. Why do we have to walk into work and have our stuff taken from us? It just makes no sense. It's mind-boggling in my opinion, and I really think that overall it's dumb. We're not children. It's not even a bit, it's really childish from Amazon. And I would try to compare it to like high school or middle school maybe, but even when I was in high school and middle school, they never took our phones. They let us keep it in our pocket. Now, if we were constantly texting and doing something like that, yeah, of course, teacher would take it up, give it to you at the end of class, but we never walked into school and had our phones taken immediately. The last job that I worked tried to implement that as well, but nobody listened and nothing ever happened. They couldn't enforce the rule. Amazon somehow got away with this for years before COVID, and it's mind-boggling. It's childish. It's our property. Why are you going to take it in as soon as we get there? It makes no sense, but I don't know. I think that it's really childish, and honestly, it doesn't make any sense. If they don't even do it at school, why would you do it at work? We're grown adults. It's our stuff. Let us keep our stuff. And then the last point that I want to bring up for why we should keep our phones is it is the most important one. I really do think that it helps improve mental health at the facility. When you're working there and there's no music going, there's no headphones, no nothing, you're just there with your own thoughts, it gets very, very boring, and you hear this all the time. I've experienced it myself. It makes you go crazy. Like, you sit there, you get super, super bored, and eventually you just go crazy. You're like, oh my gosh, I just want to go home already. This is so boring. You have to sit there for 10 to 12 hours with nothing but your own thoughts. It's ridiculous. It sucks. I really, really think that allowing us to listen to audiobooks, podcasts, music, etc. would improve our mental health, would allow us to still feel like a human being, and just keep us happier overall. For those who don't know, Amazon actually, my location doesn't have this, but a lot of Amazon facilities around the country are now getting little pods where you can go sit and cry and just let out all of your frustration. You go in there, you lock yourself in there for however long you may need. I think it's like a 30-minute maximum thing, and you could sit there and cry, you could sit there and just be frustrated, whatever. You can sit there and vent to yourself. There is a problem with that. And no, it's not the people who are using that, it's the company, because why on earth should you need that? You should not need that. You shouldn't work in a place where you can be driven that crazy to where you have to go sit in a pod and cry. You shouldn't have to have that. Just think about that. Think about that. You should not have to have that. You should just be able to be mentally okay and mentally stable for your entire shift. 10 to 12 hours, really, really difficult if you don't have any entertainment at all. No phones, no YouTube videos, no music, no nothing. There's a problem when you have to go sit in a pod and cry at your job. There's a problem there. Don't make those pods. Make it easier for us to just be mentally okay and stable while we're at work. let us keep our phones, let us listen to music, let us listen to podcasts. But those are just my thoughts on why I think we should be able to keep our phones. I only have one point on why we shouldn't be able to keep our phones, and it's not even really valid, and that is it might decrease productivity if they allow us to have our phones. You might have some employees who just sit on their phones all day and not do much, but there is a reason you have rate. You have rate that is expected to be met for a reason, and that's because if those people don't meet that rate, they'll get written up. That stops people from being on their phones the entire shift. If you have those rates, which Amazon does, then you do not have to worry about people being on their phones. So realistically, it might decrease productivity ever so slightly though, because people know that they still have to meet those rates. And if they're not going to sit there and meet their rates and they're going to be on their phone, then they can get fired. Okay, but at the end of the day, I'm trying to argue for the fact that it might decrease productivity, but I just don't believe it, and I cannot argue for it because that was my only point, and it just doesn't stand, because then you think about the fact that you already have rates that need to be met and these people need to be meeting the rates. And yeah, my only point was that it might decrease productivity. It can be argued against though, so that's my only point for why we should not be allowed to have phones in the facility. What do you think? Should we be allowed to keep our phones in the facility? Let me know down in the comments below. Give your reasons on why you think we should be able to keep our phones, or maybe not. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and leave a like and subscribe on this video if you did enjoy it. And yeah, I'm curious to see you guys' thoughts, because I'm curious to see if there's anyone who genuinely believes we should not have our phones once this whole pandemic is over, which I don't know when it's going to end. I have a feeling that they're just going to take it away eventually, regardless of the pandemic. Who knows? Because I know managers have been talking about, the fact that we are going to go back to that rule eventually where we can't have our phones, but who knows? Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe down below. I will catch you guys on the next one. Let's try to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of this year. My goal was 800. We broke that thanks to you guys. Now let's get 1,000. Catch you guys in the next one. Love you all. Peace.